So, hello and welcome to the Climate Conundrum podcast. Today, we're honored to have a distinguished guest with us, Dr. Ajay Mathur, a prominent figure in the field of renewable energy and climate change. Dr. Mathur currently serves as the Director General of the International Solar Alliance, a global organization dedicated to promoting solar energy and addressing climate change challenges. With his extensive background in the energy sector, Dr. Mathur has held key positions such as the Director General of the Energy and Resources Institute and the Director General of India's Bureau of Energy Efficiency. Big titles, so very happy to have him here. He has also contributed to India's environmental policies, having been a member of the Indian Prime Minister's Council on Climate Change. Dr. Mathur has also played a crucial role in shaping global climate agreements. He's represented India as part of the negotiating team at the 2015 UN Climate Change Conference. That was when the historic Paris Climate Agreement was signed, if you remember. And his expertise and leadership in the realm of sustainability and clean energy have made him a respected voice on the international stage as well. He has also written a book co-authored called Energy Efficiency Matters. And this is one of really good reads. I would recommend everyone to go through it to serve as a crucial component of sustainable development. I have had a very good opportunity to spend some time with him in Rwanda for the ISA's regional committee meeting for Africa last year. And I'm delighted to be taking up the conversation from where we left off. So Dr. Mathur, welcome to the Climate Conundrum podcast. This is the first episode of the show.
Very much. It's an absolute delight to be with you.
Thank you so
much.
much.
And as you said, it's great to follow up on conversations after Rwanda.
Yes. Right, so we can dig in directly. And I think first I'd like to tackle a very obvious question that comes to everyone's minds when we talk about solar energy. The International Energy Agency, for example, put out a report last year. And it seems that in 2023 alone, solar PV accounted for 3/4 of renewable capacity additions worldwide. So I guess my first question would be, what is the role of solar energy in the fight in this climate crisis era that we are living in?
Sanika, I think there are three things that are happening as far as the solar field is concerned. First is the sheer amount of new capacity that is being generated. In 2023, we had something like 440 plus gigawatts of solar capacity alone that was added. The total added, as you said, remained very similar. About 75% of the renewable energy capacity was solar, and 90% of the new capacity that was added was renewables globally. The second point about solar is that it has become the cheapest source of electricity in almost every geography that you can think of. So in India, for example, you can now get solar electricity at less than 2 rupees a kilowatt hour, plus wind plus storage. Provided an electricity at a cost of about 4 rupees per kilowatt hour, which is still 80% of the cost of new coal that was added last year. And therefore, we expect that the price of solar will keep on decreasing. The third point that I would like to make solar energy is that while a huge amount has been added, the total global solar capacity already exceeds 1,600 gigawatts or something of that sort. The challenge is that the vast amount of it is occurring in the OECD and China.
Right.
All of the 440 gigawatts that was added in India was something of the order of a little more than 10 gigawatts. This is a matter of concern because Africa, for example, which has the best solar availability and also has a huge amount of electricity demand, could only pull in enough investment to enable approximately 3% of the, so just as much as India did one country, all of Africa did in 2023. This is a matter of challenge for us. How on earth do we get the developing countries to also attract enough resources to invest in solar energy?
Yeah, I think that is a definitely high priority area, it seems. I guess then we can quickly move on to what ISA's role is in all of this, right? Because you mentioned Africa, you mentioned India, but I'd like people to also understand where ISA steps in. What was it sort of established for? What are the vision and the current priority areas?
So, the International Solar Alliance is an intergovernmental organization. We today have 118 member countries who have signed on to the ISA framework agreement. This number keeps increasing, but the point is that in something of the order of 78 or 79 countries, we have active programs. Active programs means we are either helping them with the changes in the regulatory rules that are needed to pull in solar energy, or we are looking at how we can look at pulling in more investment in those countries, or we are looking at capacity building, or at creating advocacy which helps those countries to change. So there's something or the other happening in these 78 or 79 countries. The last point is that we are also now got broad support. While the bulk of financial support is by India, we are now seeing something like 10 countries, including 4 developing countries, which are providing resources to ISA as it moves ahead. And as I said, what we do is provide resources for analytics and advocacy. How do you get a country leader to commit to moving ahead on solar and renewable energy? The information that is required. A great challenge recently has been how on earth do you get manufacturing that is geographically diversified? So this is one of the things that we analyzed and wrote on. Similarly, how do you get solar to be the source of choice as far as providing renewable energy access to all is concerned, rather than energy access by grid extension as has been the norm till now? So add one more choice to it, solar mini grids. We have worked on capacity building in many countries. And as I said, we are working on regulatory matters on how to pull in investment, how to ensure that the capacity is built up, and also to enable more and more processes for the solar capacity to come in. For example, in most countries, new electricity capacity is either done by the state utility or is pulled in through negotiations between this government and the private sector. However, if you want to do it through a bidding route so that the price keeps on reducing, you need to have institutions in place, you need to have processes in place.
Right.
Both for doing the bidding and later on to make sure that those people get the money for supplying the electricity that they did. All of this means that both regulations and institutions need to change. We help countries with that.
Right. So what I hear is that ISA is basically a bridge between, say, policymakers, governments, academicians, scientists, as well as the private sector.
And the private sector, yeah.
And the private sector. So you are putting in place some policies or some processes, like you explained, to help sort of ease these future roadmaps. Is that the case?
Correct. Absolutely correct. The only thing that I would add to that is that we help countries put in the place those policies. We bring those policies to their attention. We bring why they are important and help them in implementing it.
Right. So when you say you help countries, that sounds like a huge jump, right? Because if someone at an individual level looks at it, who do you exactly work with when you work with countries? Is it the energy ministries? Are these the NDCs that have been put through the Paris Climate Agreement? How does this process work?
So, since we are an intergovernmental organization, it's the governments of countries who are our members. And each country identifies a person who's called a national focal point, NFP, who is the bridge between the member country and the International Solar Alliance. This person, the national focal point, is either the number one or number two or number three person in the Ministry of Energy. So the relationship is directly with the Ministry of Energy rather than with the Ministry of Environment, which is typically where the climate change is located. The one other point that I'd like to make is that the reason why this is important is that most developing countries are up to here as far as borrowings are concerned. And therefore, there is very little that the government can do to borrow to create new capacity, which is the reason to get the private sector in, which is the reason for you and I to invest in solar energy as the provider of energy to us personally in the years to come.
Right. So speaking of policy, then, what are some of the key issues or key priority areas in the solar sector at present? Where do you think this progress is going?
Tanika, this is a huge canvas.
Yes.
And it obviously depends on the country, what it has done, and what more it has to do. So, for example, one of the first things is do the national policies allow private sector investment in the energy sector? Because, as I said earlier, countries cannot raise the money for their own utilities to go ahead with solar capacity. You need private sector money. Do we have the framework in place so that they can come in, they can invest, and they get paid for the electricity that they supply? So that's number one. The second is, if you want solar mini grids to provide energy access, particularly in rural areas, you need to ensure that there is space for it. So typically, it looks like, number one, that if it's less than a certain capacity, you don't need permission from anybody. Second, what is the price at which you want to sell? If the price is less than what is discovered through a bidding process, in that case, the government needs to subsidize this. We prefer one-time subsidies rather than ongoing subsidies, because that makes a clear line as to what the government's commitments are going to be in the years to come. Third, so first was the private sector, second was solar mini grids. The third is, how on earth do you attract the private sector? You can do bids, but when they come in and they get the bids, do they have to find the land on their own? Do they have to build a transmission line on their own to get the electricity to the place where the load is? No. So what helps, we have found in various countries, including India, is that it helps if the governments parcel off pieces of land.
Right. Okay.
Where you can come in as a private sector player and almost do a plug and play in order to put up new solar capacity. It also helps because then the government can have a transmission line from this entire packet of land to the place where the load center is. One of the other key issues, Sanika, which we are grappling with right now, is that while solar plus wind plus storage has been shown, at least in India, to be cost effective for new capacity compared to fossil fuel capacity, the capital investment is very high. So if you're doing 100 megawatts of coal-based power, you'll get an equivalent amount of round-the-clock electricity from approximately, let's say, about 180 or 190 megawatts of solar plus wind plus battery. And the cost, therefore, is almost double. This is a challenge because if you look at India, for example, approximately 15% of our annual investment across the economy occurs in the electricity sector.
Yeah.
Are we saying we're going to increase it to 30% or 40%? Just think of what this would mean for other sectors of the economy, which would not have these funds going in. Which means that we need to increase the velocity of money, the rate at which money goes through. So you need to fund the creation of these capacity. As soon as it becomes operational, take that money out, put it in a new project. The project will still need money, therefore you need to have bonds. And therefore your retirement money and my retirement money can be put into the bonds because they will have a regular source of income from the sales of the electricity that occur. We need to put in this kind of a process in every country.
So is there something you said India is actually doing really well on this front compared to, say, Africa or some other countries, or continents rather? What is happening in India currently? Do we have such processes in place, and what is the policy environment like currently?
Remember that in 10 or 12 years ago, the amount of solar electricity in India was almost negligible. It was very much like in the other developing countries today. Yet, through a series of policy interventions, we have come to the point where solar is today the largest growing sector of the electricity economy.
Yes, yes.
Which means that we've done something right. Which also means that given the compulsions of a developing country, the kinds of policies that those countries follow could draw on what India has done. This is important because what it tells us is that at least as far as large-scale solar is concerned, at least as far as transmission lines are concerned, we have something to be proud of. Okay. We have policies that are in place. We have seen it go down to a price level which is low. As I said, we still have challenges of states carving out an adequate amount of land. We have seen Gujarat go with Khavda on the India-Pakistan border, where they're saying 30 gigawatts of solar plus wind plus storage can come in. We need, or we have seen Karnataka do it, or we have seen Rajasthan do it, but we need all states of the country to be able to carve out this land so that the new plants can be put there and the transmission lines can be built.
Absolutely. So I think this is a good place to ask a particular question where a lot of critiques sort of bring this up when we talk about solar. Is it needs a lot of land, first of all. Then there's the storage capacity issues. And then finally, there's also a lot of recycling issues with old solar panels that you cannot use anymore, and that is just landfill, I guess, sometimes. What is ISA's approach currently on this? Do we have any solutions? Can we be optimistic about this?
So, being optimistic, yes. What is the plan? Right now, there is, for example, in India and in many parts of the world, a plan for the recycling of solar panels. But the recycling essentially is within the ambit of the electronics waste disposal, and looks at these waste material being put through the recycling process so that they can be reused. The problem that we have and what we are looking at right now is that if you look at solar technology 25 years ago, it was very different from the solar technology of today. And we can expect that the solar technology of 25 years from now will be very different from the solar technology of today, which means that when you recycle it for reuse, it cannot be the reuse as of today.
Right, it is a future outlook.
I have no idea what the technology of 25 years later will be like.
Right.
So the only thing that I can plan on is that I separate out all the materials that are possible to be separated out. We are
Hmm.
separating out glass, we are separating out the support. We also need to be able to separate out the materials that go into making the semiconductor, which is the solar cell.
Correct.
This means that standards today have to be put in place so that the manufacturers manufacture the product so that it can be recycled and reused 25 years from now. This is something that we are working with the International Electrotechnical Commission, who sets up the standards across the world
Hmm.
for establishing these. So this is work in progress, Sanika. I can't give you an answer, but that's the direction in which we are going.
Wonderful. Okay. So there is a lot of movement happening here. I think there's a lot of innovation also happening
Mhm.
um, to make solar as sustainable as possible, right from procurement to the dispanelment and recycling as well.
That's right.
Yeah. I think another issue that comes up is the biodiversity impact when you put up large scale solar projects, say in Gujarat or even Rajasthan currently. There's there's some issues that have come up about, for example, the great bustard, which is a bird that is highly endangered, and the land use for solar has also affected this a little bit negatively. Of course, no one can particularly point out that this is the project that affected the bustards rapid extinction is a large word to use, but at least challenges faced in this sense. So can we do something about this? Is there something already being done?
There are two kinds of things that are being done. The first is to do a much better mapping as far as biodiversity is concerned. And there are two kinds of mapping that are needed. One is what is home
Hmm.
to existing biodiversity. The second is what are the migrations of
Yes.
biodiversity, particularly, for example, the Great Indian Bustard is concerned. It's those kinds of issues that need to be done. We have started moving. Very recently, I think it is the Nature Conservancy,
Yes.
which brought out a tool called Site Right, in which what they do is they look at the areas which make sense for solar and wind, and also map at the same time the no-go areas as far as hot areas of biodiversity are concerned, so that you know that these are the areas where you shouldn't go in.
Hmm.
And increase in India, for example, this tool is now being adopted by a number of states when
Okay.
they give approvals for solar development to occur. So yes, there is movement. We'll have to be Sanika. One of the key issues in solar is that lots of things we are doing for the first time. We
Yes.
need to explore options. So whether it is waste recycling, whether it is biodiversity, we need to explore options. And then there are some options that will work. We need to exploit them fully.
Hmm.
So this exploration and exploitation process is an ongoing process in solar as we speak.
So I think the only way out is to connect with more stakeholders, get more people involved, and try to at a local level find out what works, what doesn't. Because I'm guessing what works for India probably doesn't have the
Absolutely.
context for somewhere else. But yeah, I guess on that context, I would like to bring up the innovative case studies book that we published under ISA, where innovative uses of solar across different segments have been compiled. So I think this is a good self-promotional moment, I guess. Uh, I think the next question that actually is a slightly personal one because I've been reading up about solar and the energy transition. And what always comes to mind when I look at data is renewables can only go so much because the current economic model is such that our energy demand and consumption is just growing. But renewables can only go so far to fulfill those. So, what do you think? Of course, this is a little out of the solar context, but where do you think is what is going to fulfill this gap area? Because we want to get cleaner energy, we want to move away from fossil fuels, but renewables can go so far. So how do we tackle this?
Sanika, there are two different dimensions to this question. The first is the absolute availability of renewable energy. The absolute availability is not an issue. For example, the world gets in 1 hour enough sunlight, which is equivalent to the amount of energy it needs through the year, right? But this assumes that you are using the entire Earth's surface, you're able to get it at 100% efficiency and so on, neither of which is true. But what it tells you is that the availability is far, far more than what the demand is. Now, the two dimensions that I spoke about, one is the kind of renewables that will occur in one geography will be different from those which occur in others. So, for example, in the northern latitudes, you've got a lot more wind. The sun is not as strong, though some of the northern countries, Denmark, Germany, etc., are very, very strong as far as solar energy is concerned. The second issue is how do we enable everybody, you and I, to also start using solar? So yes, large solar farms do make sense. But for example, if you're talking of a farmer and I'm a small farmer, how on earth do you enable me to start using solar for what I do? So whether it's a solar pump or whether it's a solar cold storage, the processes that are needed, for example, availability of money upfront to buy the solar pump and pay it back over a period of time, or a business model that enables somebody to invest in solar cold storage and make sure that he earns from it. Those are the kinds of interventions that we need so that solar is much broader than only large solar farms.
Absolutely. I think individual effort will go a long way here. So I do know that ISA is doing a lot of work on this, especially say in developing and small island nations, as well as on an individual level, even in India, right? Could you give some examples of what has worked and where you see some light at the end of this tunnel?
So one of the key areas where things have worked out is using solar in the health sector.
Right.
And whether you look at primary healthcare centers or district hospitals or multi-speciality hospitals, all of them we have shown can be solarized.
Okay.
If you look at the northeastern states of India, with the intervention of the Selco Foundation, we have helped to solarize the entire health facilities in these states. So it's possible. The key challenge is, again, one of resources, because the upfront resources are high.
Cost is high, yeah.
But instead of having no electricity so vaccines won't survive, or having very expensive electricity based on diesel, you have solar electricity, which is, in a sense, in terms of costs, frozen at the time when you set up the solar plant. So this works. Similarly, when you are talking of solar cold storages, which I spoke about a moment ago, or solar pumps, these are things that work. The key issue is how do we enable upscaling of these technologies across the entire value chain?
Right. So did COVID sort of push and propel this focus on the health sector?
I wish I could say a strong yes, but there were many other problems associated with COVID. For example, the supply chains, supply of solar panels to various countries, particularly in Africa, was challenged. There were several months in which there were no solar panels available in all of Africa. But yes, the realization that solar could electrify solar, particularly primary healthcare centers, and help vaccines survive. That was important because in the absence of that, we saw a lot of vaccine wastage
Right.
occur across the world.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So, Dr. Mathur, moving away from the individual aspect, I know that ISA has nine program areas that are key. What could you just help me understand what those are? And maybe also, I'd like to focus a little bit on the green hydrogen aspect because that is an absolute confusion area where people don't know what it means. Um, what is green hydrogen? But I think we can tackle the first part of the program areas and then move on to this.
Okay, so the 9 programs relate to issues like helping large solar farms, issues like helping solar panels to be put on rooftops, uh, issues related to them being used in things like solar pumps and other agricultural utilization, for the batteries that are needed for it to occur, for the solar waste to be managed, and of course, green hydrogen.
Right.
So green hydrogen is essentially any hydrogen that is made with no use of fossil fuels in its production. So the way it is made is that you use renewable electricity from solar or wind or biomass, or a mixture of those, and split water. So splitting water creates hydrogen and oxygen, and that hydrogen becomes the green hydrogen that we speak about. So green hydrogen is important in as much as no fossil fuel has been used in its production. But the second is that it is theoretically usable forever. It's sustainable because as you use a hydrogen, you convert it into water. That water goes back as water vapor into the atmosphere, making more water, which can then be used again.
Right.
And to give you a flavor, we essentially use enough oil in this country, which could be met by green hydrogen, which employs less than 1/10 of the water that is used in the agriculture sector today.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So therefore, yes, there's a lot of water that is required for splitting, but it is not immense.
Right. And here then just circling back to what you said, the role of solar lies in the initial stages of actually powering the
Electricity.
water electricity usage to produce the green hydrogen. But is it also to store and sort of put the energy back in the grid? Where all does solar come into play here?
So I think the largest use of solar is in the equipment which is known as the electrolyzer, where solar electricity is used to split the water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the vast amount of solar electricity is used now. Obviously, one of our challenges is that we create cost-effective and very efficient electrolyzers, so that you need as little solar electricity as possible, especially in the years ahead. Because one of our greatest challenges is that green hydrogen made from solar electricity costs something in the vicinity of $4 to $4.50 a kilo.
Oh, okay.
That compares very unfavorably with the hydrogen, not green hydrogen, but what is called as gray hydrogen, which is made at $1.50 to $2 a kg by the reformation of natural gas.
Right. Okay.
So that is one of our key challenges as we move ahead on green hydrogen to make it cost effective.
I think innovation on that front is currently going to be very
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely. That's the exploration part that's going on.
And is ISA funding or sort of promoting any such innovation as well? Like, is that also part of the work that is being done?
So ISA does not fund research on its own, but we work with the national systems of innovation. For example, what the Department of Science and Technology would fund in India, or the US National Science Foundation would fund in the US, we work with them to see that these kinds of options are explored early on.
So that is the academic sort of bridge that we were talking about earlier.
That's it.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think one of the last few questions that I wanted to tackle was we spoke about the individual's role in all of this, but what can and rather how can individuals and communities contribute to the growth of the solar sector? What are some practical steps that me, for example, as just my like an individual myself at this point can do? Like, what is it? Is there something that I can do?
Sarika, one of the key issues that has happened in the past few days in India is the launch of the solar rooftop program.
Hmm.
Therefore, you and I and everybody else can get a subsidy of up to 78,000 rupees to put up solar panels on our rooftop.
Okay.
This makes great sense. But I would very, very strongly suggest that you first need to look at all your consumption pattern. Reduce it as much as possible. I'll give you an example. Many, many years ago, we used to have solar panels producing light, and the light was produced by an incandescent bulb. When we changed the incandescent bulb to an LED bulb, the amount of electricity that it needed dropped to nearly 1/10 of what was needed. The solar panel reduced in size by an order of magnitude, and so did its price. So,
Hmm.
how much solar panel you will need will depend on how much you can invest on energy efficiency. Now,
Right.
remember that an incandescent bulb would cost, I don't know, 10 rupees, and an equivalent LED bulb would cost 110 rupees or something. So maybe
Hmm.
100 rupees more. But the price of the solar panel came down by approximately 2,000 rupees
Oh wow. Okay.
because of this. So
That is.
that is the kind of trade-off that is that occurs. Invest in energy efficiency, put up solar panels, and do as much storage as makes sense. Now, all our homes have batteries because we have grown up on an inverter battery culture because electricity wasn't reliable.
Yeah.
Use those batteries to charge them with solar during the day so that you can use them at night when the solar electricity is not available. These are things that make great sense that
Hmm.
you and I can do in our homes. But even at work, it makes great sense to put solar rooftops. And depending on the work that you're doing, if you are a farmer, as I said, solar panels make great sense for solar pumps and solar cold storages. If you are in the manufacturing sector, using solar electricity for manufacturing makes economic sense today. So no matter in what capacity you want to use, you can use decentralized but grid connected solar electricity any day.
So, what is the current situation in India? If I have solar rooftops, do I put the excess energy back in the grid, or is this a centralized process?
So, yes, there is a process which is called net metering, in which you use all the solar electricity when it's available. And when it's not available, you can put it back into the grid. And for example, at night, draw from the grid
Right. Okay.
electricity that you need. So, what they bill you for is the net electricity that you've consumed. So, what you have bought from the grid minus what is it that you have provided to the grid. So, that net metering system occurs in various countries. Now, in some geographies, not in India, but in some geographies, what they pay you for the electricity is somewhat less than what they charge for the electricity because everybody is putting in electricity at the same time at 3 o'clock in the afternoon when there
Mm.
aren't that many buyers. And at night, everybody wants to buy from the grid. So those are the kinds of challenges that the grid has. But be that as may, the point remains that excess electricity can be sold to the grid.
Okay, wonderful. I think I wanted to show you something quickly that how it has amazed me because I have something which is like a really small light, and I have a couple of these that I give to people as well because it's a solar bulb and it's amazing. I've been using it for 3 years or 4 years, and it works really well when I don't need a lot of bright light or if there's a power failure or something. So I think, yeah, truly, the way solar has come and creeped into our individual lives at a very localized level is beyond imagination. Because growing up, I think I remember solar as some long-term future, which has now actually come into our homes.
And much of this has been driven by the huge decline in the costs
Mm.
of solar power. Uh, we have seen a of almost 80 to 85% reduction in costs over the last 15, 16 years.
Mm.
This is amazing. This has brought solar into your home and mine.
Right, right. I think on a candid note, I want to also ask you, you travel the world and see a lot of innovative uses or like youngsters coming up and trying out new things in this sector. What is the craziest innovation that you've seen?
I don't know craziest,
Okay,
but
I mean,
certainly the one which I remember most is in Africa, a dental chair that was powered by solar.
oh
Now,
wow,
because of that, the solar chair could go from village to village, and it didn't have to carry a diesel genset to provide the electricity.
this is interesting.
So it completely blew my mind to see that and see how it was being used.
Yeah, this should be scalable, hopefully.
Exactly. Exactly. I hope so.
Dr. Mathur, last question I have, which I'd like to ask almost every expert that will come up on this show, is today I see a lot of interest among youngsters as well as mid-career professionals to work in the space of the fight against climate change, whatever that might be, right? Renewables, it could be whatever skill set you have. So, what, according to you, should should youngsters do? What is your message for
So,
them?
Sonika, this is a life-changing process. And as a life-changing process, there are at least two or three things that you and I can do. The first thing is that in our investment decisions, whether it is at the home or whether it is at work, see how we get renewable and particularly solar electricity. That's the first. I would emphasize something that I said earlier, which is also look at how your electricity and energy demand can be minimized. So promote energy efficiency by high-starred products instead of low-starred products.
Mhm. Can you explain what that means? I'm
Oh,
not sure everyone understands the stars because yes, it's a very, very crucial point, I think, in this.
so there is on most high energy demand appliances, refrigerators, air conditioners, etc., a star labeling. And a 5-star is the most efficient. The 1-star is the least efficient of products that are in the market.
Hmm.
If we go in, and this keeps changing. So, for example, when the labeling program was introduced in 2007, what was 5-star at that time is not even 1-star now. It's out of the market. You
Okay.
can't.
So is it a yearly review? Is it
There's I think, a 2-year or a 3-year review
okay?
of the star ratings. So buy a 5-star whenever it makes sense. That's number one. That's number two. The third issue is ask for the kinds of changes that you need in order to make this happen. So never underestimate your own political power. We need mechanisms through which I can invest in solar. So whether it is through a mutual fund that only invests in solar, or whether it is putting up a solar panel on my roof, or it is enabling the electricity company to ensure that it buys the electricity that I produce, all of those are actions that your political movement and mine would help in moving ahead.
Yeah, definitely. The personal is political after all.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, this was really nice. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you for watching this episode. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We're also available on other social media. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. See you around for the next episodes.